Ano na ang pananaw ng ordinaryong Pilipino sa human rights, sa topic ng human rights, sa issue ng human rights, at sa mga defenders ng human rights?
Well, very clear, the government's attitude towards human rights has changed drastically from previous administrations, and that has cascaded down into the people. There has always been a segment of our population has not been that has not really been able to hindi natin naipaabot sa kanila yung kahalagahan ng karapatang pantao. And I think that is what the present administration took advantage of. They they extracted the very simplistic approach to human rights. Di ba sabi nga ni Pangulo, I'm interested in human life, not human
That's
rights.
right.
When that dichotomy does not exist in human rights, precisely why we protect human rights is to protect human lives. But that he was able to quote unquote sell that to some people in the public because we have our educational system in a way has not delivered on that issue of making people understand why human rights are so important in our country. And one of
Mhm.
the proposals I have is that we include in basic education human rights. In fact, many years ago, we had developed. My sister and I went around the country giving basic human rights training to public school teachers based on modules that were to be incorporated in the subjects that they were taking. So walang hiwalay na subject na human rights, pero kahit sa mathematics, kung ano man mga subject, we would incorporate the concepts. And it was very promising at that time, but it never got off the ground. It was never adopted by the Department of Education.
Some would say na ano na uh, the issue of human rights, while you stand firmly on it and while you use it as ano, you would want to use it as a flag for everybody to rally around. Uh, some quarters might even use it against you. Na ay nako, human rights lawyer yan, di ba? How do you feel about that? Na instead of some people rallying around the human rights, they might actually take that issue against you.
Well, first of all, you're right. We were already integrating human rights into the mainstream of the PNP and the AFP. In fact, until 2016, before 2016, I mean, groups like Flag and other groups that before were looked at as kalaban ng PNP and AFP, we were actually the ones providing training
Yeah.
on many occasions to the AFP and the PNP. And it was from being so-called polar opposites. We were working very well together. And I was very optimistic at that time that within a decade, human rights would really be part of the understanding of our men and women in uniform. But it's quite sad that after when this administration took over and they started making these public pronouncements about human rights, many of those gains were lost. And now we find ourselves back in a situation where both the public, and not the entire public, but at least segments of the public and many of those in uniform have taken a very different attitude to human rights. And insofar as my own campaign is concerned and what you mentioned about pwedeng gamitin na laban sa akin yung pakikipaglaban ko sa karapatang pantao, I will never turn my back on being a human rights defender and human rights lawyer. That's been my life. And if they want to
Mhm.
throw that at me, that's fine. Eh. Pati nga ngipin ko, di ba? Binabato nila sa akin. Eh. Okay lang naman sa akin yun.
So looking at all these in toto, how do you assess where we're headed?
Well, not to mention the CHR as well. By the end
Oh
of
yeah.
his term, the president would have appointed 13 of the 15 justices of the court, the members of the COMELEC, and also the Commission on Human Rights. Now, going back to the early part of your question, Ed, I think the attacks on human rights were deliberate because human rights really serves as a check on abuse by the government and on authoritarianism. And we have really seen a steady challenge to our democratic institutions that began with the removal of the Chief Justice, not through any form of impeachment, but rather through quo warranto, the attempt to give the CHR a 1,000 peso budget, the attacks on the fourth estate, the press, not just Rappler and Maria Ressa, but of course ABS-CBN and even other media outfits, and all, and then the attacks as well during the lockdown on ordinary netizens who simply were expressing their disgust or disappointment over what was happening in government and were visited at their homes, arrested without warrant, and charged with inciting to sedition. And all of this, to me at least, clearly shows a pattern to replace the democracy that we fought so hard for with a more centralized kind of authority where everyone must just follow. Wag na kayong umimik, mahimik na lang kayo, sumunod na lang kayo. Disiplina ang problema ng Pilipino. These are themes that are very clearly of the bent that is not in a democratic, that we do not find in a democracy. And that really bothers me a lot because, you talk about human rights. It really means two things. Human rights is all about accountability and it's about empowerment. When you recognize the rights of katutubo, of a fisher folk, of a worker, you are empowering that. You are empowering them, and that is the complete antithesis of a government that wants to dictate on everyone. Because what that kind of government is concerned with is not empowering people; it's concerned with empowering itself.
Bilang